everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ult In Ten. And today with me I have someone you might recognize from IPL, which happened, I believe, this last weekend. It's TakashiX from V8. Why don't you introduce yourself and say hi?
Hey, this is TakashiX here. Thanks for having me. Currently playing AP mid for V8 esports. So,
All right, well, why don't you start off telling us a little about yourself in terms of gaming and your history of it?
well, I guess as early as I can remember, I've been playing video games since original NES, original Zelda, and I guess Street Fighter 2 and Sonic games on Sega. And eventually, I just grew into Warcraft 3, all the Blizzard games. Really, I'm sure as many people have said, like Blizzard games are just the best. And so Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, StarCraft. After I started playing Warcraft 3, I actually started playing Dota, and that was, I guess, the start of my MOBA career. I played Dota a little professionally, kind of like went to some tournaments, made a little bit just off the prizes, but never nothing nearly as big as League of Legends.
All right,
So.
and you have to agree though that Zelda was probably the best game ever made, ever, right?
I would say it's definitely top 10.
All right.
Definitely top 10.
Well, in this game, you're playing Vladimir against the Mordekaisers, and you told me a little earlier, that Mordekaisers are pretty good counter to Vladimir. But as we're seeing here, you're kind of dealing with that. And how do you specifically deal with that against him?
It's a pretty tough matchup. You just have to make sure you don't get hit by the creeps and his hit by his AoE when he hits the creeps and you, because that's really where Mordekaiser shines, is he able to harass you while not being harassed while farming creeps. So if you can kind of, I guess, force him to choose between hitting you and hitting creeps, he'll. A lot of people usually go for the creeps, so you can win out a little bit on the harass.
Yeah, as we saw actually during that spot right there, before this kill that we're seeing with with your ignite, as you just walk away like a boss, is that you're kind of sticking to the sides of the lane and not really sitting behind your creep line, just so you're making them choose, like you just said.
Right, exactly.
And
Have to,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, you just have to try to, force them to choose. Yep, exactly.
All right, well, let's talk about what's your early game goals as Vladimir. I'm assuming a Woda is definitely like a key item you want to go for, but what about in terms of, building towards items later, in terms of like getting any kills or in farm?
Well, in the early game, I say the first 10 minutes is mostly just really focused on the laning phase. Like you're not gonna have very strong games because you have no real CC. So essentially, especially against Mordekaiser, it's just try to get all the creeps and try to stop him from getting creeps, because whoever wins out, I guess, in the AP, it's gonna be very binary. Whoever has more AP, because if you can break his shield and deal damage while healing, like you're gonna win every trade. And he can deal damage while not taking damage because of his shield, and you can't lifesteal enough. He'll win out every trade. So your first buyback is really crucial. It's whether or not you can, um, I guess, survive the trades with Mordekaiser.
Right, and can you actually talk with us a little bit about your masters and runes you're running in this game?
I should be running 2190. I really like the Executioner Mastery. Some people go defense, but the Executioner Mastery, like 6%, I guess, when they're below 40% HP, is pretty big deal. Considering I think it works also on Ignite, so the increased damage from Hemo Plague in my Ignite plus that in my Ignite really makes Ignite do a little bit more than most people anticipate. So
Yeah,
it
it's
can
kind of a deadly
sometimes
combo.
surprise them. Yeah.
Well, what about well, go to a community question here. Is who's your favorite non-traditional AP middle?
That's a tough one. I mean, I'm not sure if Fizz is really a non-traditional AP mid. We've seen him a couple times from the EU, but no one really in NA runs him, and he's probably one of my favorite champions. Either that or Katarina. Katarina is my baby. Back in beta, I used to play her all the time.
Well, actually, there is a person who specifically plays Katarina in ranked, Tien, who's actually going to be doing an episode. And doesn't that make you a little sad though that he's taking your baby from you?
No, I mean spreading the love is not a problem. It's just when I see there was I forget, there was a player back in beta. He used to go this like Warmog build and it just made me cringe because I don't know. Katarina is all about doing that big deeps, but as long as he plays an exciting Katarina, no problems. I'm willing to share.
Well, let's talk about what actually got you started as an AP middle, either for V8 or just in general.
I'm not really sure. I think it just happened like I just there was that like period of time when Morgana and Scion were really strong, and those were like the two champions that I was really comfortable with at the time. So it just kind of came naturally to, I guess, play the AP middle role because really every game was like a Scion or Morgana pick just because oh,
Oh, and we see here that Lisa actually came
this
in for a
double
gank.
this double suppression,
Yeah,
deadly.
that's too overpowered. And you actually do mention during this game is that all you have to really do against this composition of Skarner, Warwick, Nunu, Caitlyn, and Mordekaiser is just build a QSS, and I believe you actually do get one pretty damn early.
Right,
And
definitely.
as we're seeing here, Mordekaiser and Warwick switch. So does this kind of change your game plan of like what to build or anything like that?
Not too much because they're both, I guess you call them sustain champions in the laning phase. Warwick with his Q, Mordekaiser with his shield. So really, it's just being about being able to trade with them and win out on the trades.
And we
Because
were
if you're, yeah,
oh sorry, go ahead.
because if you're not healing enough, it's just you're just not going to be able to stay in lane against a really strong sustain champion, even if you're Vlad.
Right. And actually, that's kind of what I'm curious about is Vladimir is really weak pre-9 in terms of like sustain, because his transfusion's on such a long cooldown. And I believe you actually do end up picking up CDR boots, but we're noticing that you either try to harass whenever your Q's up or use it on a creep to get some life back. Like you're always trying to keep it off cooldown. Is that just kind of like something you need to do in lane as Vladimir?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, definitely when you're not full, you should be using your Q whenever it's not on cooldown. Like that's the greatest, one of his greatest assets is that he doesn't run out of mana. It's all cooldown based, so spamming that Q is pretty crucial. I mean, you don't necessarily want to push the lane if you think you're gonna get a gank soon, but if you don't think you're getting a gank anytime soon, like just spam that Q, get that health back, do that damage. You know, just keep trading as much as you can.
All right, and now we're back, and this is kind of the mid game of this match, and you're actually roaming around quite a bit. You push down your tower at top because you actually ended up going top because of the lane switch. So typically, what's your kind of goals right now, and exactly why are you roaming around?
Right now I pushed top out, so there's a high chance that Warwick will probably freeze because he couldn't, I guess, lane very effectively against me. The early water really just let me shove him at his tower and just keep him there and not let him CS. So if I just keep a lot of pressure on the rest of the map, like even if Warwick, farms a little bit, he's pretty far behind in CS right now. So that won't be too big of an issue. But if we can really pressure Mordekaiser to not farming, because Mordekaiser is one of those binary champions. If he can't farm very well, then he's not really gonna have very big impact. But if he can farm really well, then he's really tough, really difficult to kill.
And actually, if you were to continue fighting Mordekaiser middle, how important to you is actually taking either your race or the enemy's wraith camp to kind of keep up with them or get ahead of them?
Yeah, that's always the big question is whether you're safe enough to take those wraith camps. And it really depends on your ward and whether how strong you are. So I guess in this game I'd say I could probably take them, especially because I have a QSS. So even if Skarner ults me or Mordekaiser ults me, I can get out. So I say I keep trying to get them, but if I run into them, I don't think I can do it just because I'll take too much harass while not returning any damage.
Right, and actually, this kind of leads into you want cooldown boots for this. Can you kind of explain your mindset behind that?
Cooldown boots are really, really strong in Vladimir, especially for the laning phase because he has no mana pool. And the more you can build your ties of blood stacks up really fast. And I guess because you have so much lifesteal that cooldown, I mean, Magic Pen's not gonna make your Q heal you any harder except for the extra damage. And even that's negligible compared to the actual, I guess, heals me right now for 55 plus 29, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and you actually mentioned during that little break about the enemy team is actually building a lot of magic resist, so cooldown reduction. If you actually want to go into that real quick and how that affects it.
Right, so I guess the more MR your opponent has, the less effective flat M pen is going to be. So sometimes it's just you actually get a better DPS increase by going cooldown boots. I mean, Mordekaiser's W will probably send him up to about 80 MR. Skarner has 120 MR. Nunu at Merc Treads. Warwick has Chalice and Merc Treads. Like, he's probably gonna go Wit's End. So you can see that they go in a very heavy MR build because I'm doing pretty well right now. I have a lot of farm, doing quite a bit of damage. So cooldown boosts probably give me a higher DPS increase, assuming I stay alive enough for 2 casts.
Right. Yeah. The extra damage you would do with that 20 MP is negligible compared to actually getting off an extra attack. You know, it doesn't really build up enough damage for that. And what do you think is the what's the community question is the most underrated and most overrated champion? And I'm gonna actually take a step further in talking about just AP middles.
All right, I would say that right now, mm, I think Karthus is maybe a little overrated. He's really strong, and everyone's really scared of him. And the only reason he isn't picked every game is because he has strong counters in middle. But even if you have the opportunity, he fits in the very specific team comps, and it's really, I guess, the wall is super good, but having having the I guess really strong. I don't know. It's a really tough question between for the overrated underrated because everyone just really fits so well into very specific roles. Actually, I would say TF is the most overrated champion in middle right now for sure, and I would say Nivea is the most underrated champion in middle.
And what's your thoughts on like Xerath, who doesn't see much play, but I mean he
Oh,
is a really strong
Xerath.
pick.
Yeah, it's because his I guess sustained damage isn't very strong. Like you can see that we've kind of gone into like a sustained damage meta where like Cassio really high DPS, Vlad really high DPS, you know, Karthus really high DPS. Like people who can AP champions who can keep their damage going and not aren't just really like all burst and at the same time can be I guess moderately tanky for the most part. Xerath really just falls into that. If you fall behind and can't, I guess, full combo someone, you really don't bring nearly as much as other champions do, even when they're behind. And when you're ahead, you can't get bursted and you're still dealing high DPS. So that's the way I feel the AP mid meta is going right now.
Right. That explains why we don't see much or many brands anymore middle. You know, we're
Right.
seeing more rises where they can consistently attack instead of having just that burst and then being done kind of thing. Um,
Exactly.
and actually, you talked about Morgana, and actually, I've realized you to be really known for Morgana. And as a community question about that is, as Morgana, do you feel it's more important to try to get as many people stunned from your ultimate, or to ensure you stun a specific target?
Yeah, that's always the really big question. And I would say even more than how many targets, it comes down to timing. You know, if you can time your stuns so that it stops them from casting a spell or stops them from getting away or gives your AD an opportunity to wail on them, that's really the best chance to ultimate. Otherwise, I mean, if your team doesn't have high DPS, it's really important for you to get their AD or their AP carry or both, really. If you can get their AD and AP carry, as and like even the other 3 champions left out, it's better than I guess getting even like 4 champions if one of them is not included, because really for the most part when you ultimate, you stop them from dealing DPS because they have to run away, and if they just damage, then they're gonna get stunned in a poor position where your whole team can just beat on them and probably give them during the stun duration. So
Right. And actually, I kind of want to go back to the gameplay we're seeing is the enemy team actually picked up Baron. And how do you kind of play, or at least in solo queue, actually compare it, solo queue and team queue, talk about both. You know, what you typically do when the enemy team does get something like that, like some really major objective.
well, there's always the split push, I guess, where what you want to do is just keep the lanes pushed out so that they have a hard time getting in on you. You know, like no matter how strong the enemy team is, if they can't push, they're not going to take towers really. Like basically, as you can see, like the bottom lane super far pushed out, the top lane super far pushed out. Like that's basically our focus right now, is to keep them out of our base, so that even if they're, I guess, five shoving middle, they can't they can't split push because we already pushed out our lanes, and we can, I guess, just at this point try to focus on keeping them out of our bases five.
So is that for solo queue or is that actually for team games you're talking
Um,
about, or is that just
I
both
would
in general?
I would say both. Split pushing is really effective against Baron, both in team and solo queue. I would say the biggest difference is how you use Baron, not so much how you defend it, because really the team with Baron controls how the engagements go. Like they don't have to push if they don't want to. They can sit back, take red buffs, take blue buffs, dragons, take outside towers, and the defending team really can't do much about it other than avoid them. And you know, if the enemy team stays as five, just try to avoid them and split push.
Okay.
If they split push, you can try to get picks in transition, but even that's risky because you don't usually don't want to risk a 5v5 engagement unless you're already ahead before the Baron.
Right, and actually see where you guys are pushing into them right here, and I believe you actually do engage and pick up quite a few of them. And I kind of want to go back to the whole solo queue thing is actually, can you kind of commentate on what's happening in this fight, what you're kind of doing, going through your mind before we go to that?
Alright, so right now I know that I have the QSS, so even if they use the abilities, I'm kind of zoning for Tristana right now, trying to get them to use some abilities on me, because if Tristana's really farm, so if she's able to get DPS off, we'll definitely win the fight. Right now I'm kind of backing out because I took a lot of damage, and I see that we're kind of getting aced. Like this fight went really poorly after the Tristana got exhausted, so I decided, alright, well, as long as some of us stay alive, they won't be able to throne it. Like a problem that I see a lot is when the fight goes poorly, people want to keep fighting, and if you get aced when they have Baron buff and they have a couple of champions up, definitely they'll be able to end the game. So even if one person's still alive, like that pretty much stops them from just pushing up mid and ending. So that was basically the only thing that was going through my mind after I saw the engagement was going really poorly.
All right, now we're back, and it's kind of towards late game a little bit. Well, it is late game, and you guys actually just went through a little base race where the enemy team actually pushed your bot lane to get that inhibitor, and you and Nidalee actually pushed down middle to get pretty much their their Nexus turrets and their inhibitor. So, what's your kind of views on base racing, and like when is it a good time to do it, and when is it a bad time? Because I believe it was just you and Nidalee pushing, and you actually had two or three members back defending.
Right. It really just a large part of it is how strong your champions are at pushing. So I mean, you may not know, but the like Vlad's actually pretty decent. Like his attack speed is pretty okay for an AP. But more than that, like the 500 AP gives me a lot of damage to towers, and Rage Blade on uh Nidalee is just like huge damage. So trading I guess objectives is really good if you're closer to the objective basically, because the time it takes to kill something is usually pretty negligible in the late game. It's like 1 or 2 seconds because DPS is just so high, but movement speed late game or mid game early game doesn't really vary that much. So if you're closer to your objective, like usually a base trade is a pretty decent option.
And we're seeing here, you guys actually tried taking Baroness just on a push to go
Right.
for like the back door, and you guys end up getting pretty destroyed here. But luckily, as you see, John and Lee Sin did escape, and this Italy unfortunately will go down. And I believe the enemy team actually no, they don't pick up Baron. I believe you guys actually do pick up Baron. Can you kind of talk about? We were talking about this community question last time before we actually cut out. Was what do you think of solo queue as preparation for competitive play?
I think as far as I guess mechanics go, it's really good. As far as laning phase, it's really strong, arguably. I mean, there's a lot of I guess laning and jungler coordination that you don't really get from solo queue, but um as far as 5v5 goes though, it's not really quite as good because a lot of it's communication and making calls, like, but you can I guess develop your call building skills. I guess I mean like just because you're in so many interesting scenarios that you might not necessarily be all the time in scrims or something like that. And when that situation does arise, like two inhibs down, but they have their Nexus turrets down, Baron's up. Like, what do you do with these team comps? So you can see how it would play out. That's a really valuable, I guess, asset, really valuable skill. It's just to know how things will play out.
So
So
you definitely learn a lot of mechanics from solo queue, but
right,
communication is, another thing that's extremely important.
right.
All right. Well, we see right here, like you're just saying, you have two inhibitors down. They have their nexus wide open. Your team is actually getting banned while you're stalling in the middle right here. Can you actually walk us through this team fight that's actually about to come up?
All right, so we're basically trying to go full DPS on Baron, try to make sure we, get that as fast as possible. We get it, and then we basically just focus on it, the engagement. We're thinking, all right, well, focusing Mordekaiser is a huge deal. Focusing Caitlyn is a huge deal right now. Skarner gets a pull, so I'm trying to protect our Tristana, and I mean that kind of leaves their Caitlyn to do open to do free damage, but at the same time we got the Mord with so I guess it was a pretty decent trade at this point, 2 for 2. They make the mistake of trying to engage us when Skarner has no ult, Warwick has no ult. Like those are two basically R champions, I would call them. So and Vlad is definitely not an R champion, and then we have our AD who's ridiculously overfarmed right now. He has yeah, he has huge damage and huge lifesteal. So in any 1v1 fight, he's definitely gonna win.
And I guess the point of this whole thing is that, even though you guys were down, you guys did come back, and it's kind of like a whole thing.
Right.
In solo queue, you really shouldn't give up.
Right, definitely not. I would say that every game in solo queue is winnable. Like sometimes even I get, pretty upset and say, this game just I couldn't win it. There's no way I could have won it. But I would say every game is winnable because the enemy team won't play perfect. Like a lot of times they'll, make a lot of mistakes, troll around, get too confident, and then that's when you come back. That's when, they do like the 5-man tower dive. You ace them, get Baron, take a couple towers, and you're back in the game. So, 20 minutes surrender isn't a bad thing just because, it saves time. You can start a new game if, you didn't want to practice from like a behind scenario. But I mean, I would say that you can win most games just because the enemy team is likely to make mistakes.
All right. And I believe you actually do have a stream. Can you kind of talk about, how often you stream and kind of what you offer or have to offer during it?
Right. I'm actually just getting back into streaming. I streamed for, I guess, 1 or 2 days before IPL. And then now the IPL is finished, I took a small break and I'm going to try to start streaming pretty regularly just because I know that it helps me practice too if I'm playing AP mids and I'm talking about what I'm doing, it lets me consciously think about decisions that I'm making. And so hopefully I'll be able to stream more often and give some pretty good feedback. But also, another thing is that my games are pretty fun, I guess, because I'm known for basically going for kills all the time. If I see an enemy champion on the map, I'm not thinking, oh, he's there, I gotta, avoid him, or he's, controlling this area. It's, oh man, I can go get that kill. I'm gonna go for it. That's the first thing that comes into my mind is, can I kill this guy?
Damn, kind of bloodthirsty. All right.
Yeah,
Wait.
I mean
Or sorry.
that's what makes the game fun. The champion and champion engagements, I think, is what really makes it interesting. Because I'm not really so fond of this AP carry farm mid all day. Just wave clear type meta. It's not very interesting.
Very true, and you actually do have a Twitter as well, which will be posted alongside the link in the stream link in the info, and I'm assuming you'll be posted there if you are going to be streaming.
Right. Yep. I post on the Twitter when I'm gonna start streaming.
All right. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Is there anything you want to say before we kind of end it?
Um. No, man. Thanks for having me, and I guess thanks to everyone who's watching.
Okay. Well, that is it for another episode of Ult In Ten. Please like and subscribe as always, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.